just recently we've seen Zebec make some pretty scary drops to the downside. It looks like they're, maybe we will be seeing a little bit of a crash, or is this just some liquidity clearing that we are looking to see before we have a further move to the upside? There's a lot of different things going on, and we do have several different pieces of data that we can look at to kind of get a good guess on this. Of course, we don't ever know for sure. None of us have a crystal ball, and so we can never for certain predict where the price is going to go, but at least right now we might be able to get some level of kind of indication of what this could look like. So let's go on ahead, we'll dive right in. We have a whole bunch of different data to look at today to see kind of where the market's at, where Zebec is relative to the market, and potentially where we could be going. So again, we'll go on ahead, we'll dive right on in, and we'll start out taking a look at the crypto bubbles. Here we can see it's definitely a red day in the market here. We've got a couple here, that are green, but overall it looks kind of like a wholesale kind of pullback of about 5% on the market. Of course, some doing more, some doing less. But that seems to be kind of the average that the market is pulling back here. If we do take a look at Zebec, we can see that we have seen a pretty scary drop here. So let's go pull this to full screen. We can see this is the hourly chart. We had a really, really nice consolidation level looking here. And we were hoping for a bounce off of the bottom here and potentially a move back to the upside. But as we can see, that is not at all the case. We've definitely seen a pretty strong drop here. It looks to me that like we might be heading down for this this level right here, kind of like the 0.0037 range is kind of what we would be looking to see potentially. So that's ultimately kind of where we're looking at right now. What happens specifically, we don't know for sure, but this is kind of what we're looking at. So again, this could potentially be some short-term kind of clearing of liquidation and leverage and all this type of stuff, and potentially we see a little bit of a bounce from here. That of course would be the ideal outcome, but we have to monitor this really, really closely right now to see if this could potentially be kind of some early signs of a larger weakening happening both for Zebec as well as the altcoin market. So definitely stay posted here. Ideally, what we would be looking to see is a very, very quick move back into this wedge. Of course, there is always kind of that possibility that we go into more of like a descending wedge or a little bit more of like a descending type of channel here. That is always a possible outcome, but right now we want to be looking to see if we can hold as much of this structure as possible. I think if we see a kind of like a mega wick or a mega candle down and then a mega candle right back up in, we could potentially consider this as market makers doing what market makers do, which is kind of, manipulating the price a little bit to clear some leverage for people who may have been over leveraged. Now, if you are looking at getting into and maybe opening up some positions for Zebec, whether you think that this is a liquidity clearing event and you think we're going to be bouncing back up, whether you think that this is the structure breaking and we will be seeing signs of going lower, whichever you are interested in doing, you can feel free to use my link in the description below to get signed up for BTCC. If you are interested, they are doing 10% bonuses on first-time deposits, as well as up to $10,055 in deposit and volume bonuses there. So it's a really, really good deal. If you know trading, you know that is a pretty strong deal. So if you are interested, feel free to get signed up. I did want to move along though and continue to take a look at some of the things we're seeing in the market. And first off, I want to take a look at our market overview dashboard that we've created, because there's several different things here that we can see. So the first big one that we can see is right here. We've got the open interest and volume, and on the open interest and volume, you can see right here that we are actually pushing all-time highs of open interest. We are at $86 billion right now, looking pretty nice, honestly. Things looking pretty good there. And then we also can see RSIs continue to move back to the downside. So we can see a little bit of kind of some resetting in the market here. We are now actually in neutral. We're at 58.01, so close to strong, but we are actually have moved back into neutral from a market average of basically nearing overbought. So that is a good thing in my opinion for us to see kind of moving back a little bit here. And then we also can see here on the crypto fear and greed index, it's 75. So we are still seeing a pretty greed driven market. I do think it would make sense for us to see this start to climb back a little bit, particularly if we see price kind of moving down or even just kind of stuttering out over the next couple of days. I think it's going to be important to kind of track where that goes. And then also right now we have the Bitcoin exchange liquidation map. The Bitcoin exchange liquidation map, I'm actually going to focus on kind of specifically in itself, because I think that this is really important, as it could indicate some short-term kind of next moves here. So The first thing that we have here is if we look at the 1-day chart, we can see actually a bias towards liquidating shorts, which would mean a move to the upside. However, I don't actually think that we're going to see an immediate move to the upside. I actually think kind of the opposite. I think an immediate move to the downside makes more sense, because we can see right now Bitcoin is about 117,500. There is basically $1 billion to liquidate if we move down less than $1,000. If we get to $116,828 from exchanges, they will make essentially $1 billion if they push price down less than $1,000 per coin. That to me seems very, very easy and like an obvious move in my opinion. Now, of course, we never know exactly what is going to happen, and I'm not trying to provide financial advice or guarantees or anything like that, because of course I can't. I don't know the future, but it just seems kind of obvious to me with this much of a financial incentive. It's literally $1 billion incentive to move the price down less than $1,000. That to me seems pretty obvious. And then of course from there you can see, the liquidations cumulatively continue to go up, but the major wall you can see is kind of at this 116,500 and up range. So I think we could see a little bit of some movement to the downside there. We clear all of these liquidations. The liquidations, of course, would skyrocket. People might get overly bearish, and then we could continue to see a move back to the upside because more shorts would pile in over time here. So that's kind of my thought if we look on the 1 day. If we look on the 7 day, we can also see something similar. Actually, if we get down to like the 115,000 range, about 4.3 billion to liquidate. Again, we still do have kind of a bias that we would move to the upside, but I still am kind of doubtful that we see a move to the upside before we see a further move to the downside. That kind of seems to make the most sense to me, just given all of the liquidity that's so close here. So again, similar type of thing, down to 115,000, another 5 billion in liquidations here on the 30 day. So this one is actually showing, so we don't have confluence between all three time frames. This one is actually showing a move to the downside because there's an insane amount of liquidations here, although we would need to move all the way back down to kind of the low 100,000 range for all of these liquidations to get captured. So like I said, I don't really think that that's going to be happening. I do think we could see a really short-term move kind of down to that 115, probably 115.5 to 116.5 range, and then we could kind of start to see maybe a further move up there. I do think that would do a lot for kind of resetting some of these key metrics in the chart here as well. You think if Bitcoin continues to bleed a little bit, we might see alts continue to bleed even a little bit further, so that pulls us further down into this neutral territory. We'll see open interest and volume. Volume will probably start to drop a little bit. Open interest will probably start to drop a little bit. Fear and greed will probably come back. We may not get to neutral, but we might get kind of closer, or I guess I should say further away from extreme greed and closer towards neutral. I think a lot of this would all happen. And similarly on Hyperliquid, we can see the same type of thing. Very, very large liquidation position here at $115,846. So if we were to see kind of that move down, there's just so much money here for the taking. And so hopefully you can understand kind of what I'm getting at and what I'm seeing here from kind of this potentially short-term negative move and then a bounce from there. And so as this does relate to Zebec, if we come back to the chart, let's come here and see this. If we look at Zebec and as it relates to the chart, we could see something similar like that happening here, right? I mean, we've already broken out of the bottom of this consolidationary period. And so I think what we realistically would be looking for is kind of a consolidation on this like 0037 range. I think that would be really great. Potentially we come back even to like the 00363 range. Anything back in here would be fantastic. If we go further, it would be best to look at the daily chart because we can see we've seen a major candle close up here, right? So let's just kind of reformat this a little bit, but we can see, potentially a move back into the like 0037 range as we were discussing, and then we have the 0035 range potentially, and then below that we're probably looking at like 003, like high 3/4s essentially. So I think that's potentially what we could see here. Again, we've put in a higher high. This is still looking good. We are now looking for a higher low, right? And technically, as long as we get something above like the 0028 range, we're okay. Now, of course, it'd be best to be as high up here as possible, but anything above 0028 we're all in the clear. So that's kind of what I'm looking for in the short term. In my opinion, it's really, really important to kind of understand what you're doing and view what we're seeing in the market, not just from the sole perspective of looking at Zebec, but also looking at some of the bigger moves in the market. As we do know, Bitcoin basically decides market movement on a whole basis. And so when we see some of these obvious things, like in my opinion, an obvious liquidity hunt within $1,000 to maybe even $2,000 range from here, we have to see that happen, right? And so that, of course, short term is probably going to lead to some negative price movement for altcoins. But again, we've been talking about this for weeks now, right? Things are getting a little bit hot. We need to see a little bit of that cool down. The thing we don't want to see is what we saw kind of from January to April, which is just absolute decimation in the altcoin market. We don't want to see that. We do want to see a little bit of some cooling off, putting in some structural higher lows, and then we can continue on from there. So that really is what I'm looking at and looking toward. We'll see how things unfold. Hopefully you did find the information in this video useful. If you did, of course, a like and a subscribe does help. You can also click the notification bell so you can get notified every time I have new videos updating about whatever's going on in the market. Of course, we do have kind of the channel mainstays like Zebec, but we try to keep up with all things going on in the crypto market. So if you do find that interesting, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Also, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, things like that, feel free to drop those in the comment section below. I do try to read and respond to all of those. It is getting harder and harder as the channel grows, but I am continuing to kind of try and deliver on that. So hopefully you guys can, if it takes me a little while, give me a little bit of grace there, but I do appreciate it, and I do try to respond to all of those. So you will be hearing from me. So anyway, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.